Hi, I'm Tricia from Club Scrap, and welcome to the show. You know, paper crafting often leads us to dabble in many other areas like beading and sewing and painting and paper engineering. Today we're going to do an adaptation of a really cool interactive card. So let's get going. Let's take a look at that interactive scrapbooking page we're going to make. Right here it says pull, so let's do it and see what happens. Isn't that fun? A lot of people love this, but they have no idea how to make it. I'm going to take the mystery out of that. So let's get started with just a simple piece of 2 1/4 by 12-inch cardstock. And now what we're going to do is add a couple of score lines, and that will create the mechanism for that flip card. So for that, we're going to be using a score it board. And this right here is a mini version. I love how cute and little it is because it's great for scrapping on the go. And I'm going to be removing the stop guide to the tool. Now the stop guide is useful for when you want to make score lines repeatedly at the same measurement, but we're going to be making a lot of different measurements this time. You know, some people are pretty clever and they know they lose things. You might want to attach a little piece of hook and loop tape to this tool, and you can store it on the front end of your board and never lose that little stop guide. Speaking of losing things, the tool itself is attached to the board with some ball chain, and that also keeps you from losing the tool, and it's plenty long so you have room to work, but you'll never lose it. We're going to make our first score line at 2 inches, so I'll place the paper against the horizontal measuring rule. It has a 0 center, and there's a little notch right there where it says 0. I'm going to take the tip of my score it tool, and it's important to see here that there's a little notch in that tool. The notch needs to engage right in there so it doesn't move back and forth either direction. Apply some pressure here, and the amount of pressure depends on the thickness of the paper, and pull the tool back along this metal bar that's part of the score it board here. And what that will do is create the perfectly straight score line we're looking for. Now, the distance between this first score line and the next one we're going to make is only 1/2 inch. Don't worry about those measurements though, you can look them up in your design guide. I'll engage the tool again and pull back. Now my next score line again at 1/2 inch. The number of score lines you make depends on the number of pages you want in your book. And you also might notice that I'm not flipping the paper every time I make a score line. You would do that if you were making an accordion book, but these folds all need to go the same direction, so this doesn't require that I flip the paper each time. All right, now I need 8, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2 more score lines. And notice that my paper is extending beyond the edge of the score it board on both sides. The way I'm getting that 1/2 inch measurement is by looking at my existing score line and then moving that visually. I'm lining up the score line with the first 1/2 inch mark right here. So just a little tip. You know that you can make lots of score lines no matter what the length of your paper. All right, I've got my 8 score lines. I'll set this board aside, and then what we want to do is break in those lines a little bit. So I'm just going to be folding on each one. And by doing that, my mechanism is really going to work easily, even the first time I try to use it. It'll get smoother and smoother the more you do it. Okay, now our mechanism is actually complete. The next thing we need to do is check out our pages, individual pages. These are 2 by 2 1/4, and I've got 8 of them because that's how many score lines I've made. And I need to attach them to the mechanism, and there's a way to go about doing that. I'm going to fold the mechanism over so that it's on the very first score line here, fold it in half. So my first page goes into this spot right here. So I'm just going to put some adhesive in this spot, and then I'll attach the page. Now I'm doing this vertically and centered so it extends beyond the edge on both sides, and do not put the page on top of the score line or this mechanism won't work as well. Next I need to apply some adhesive to each area here in between the score line. Do not put adhesive on the score line. And then I have my remaining pages, and notice too that I've inked the edges of my pages, and I think what that will do is add some definition around the perimeter of each page, and it will look a little bit better. Each time I'm attaching the page, I'm lining it up from side to side and not going into that score space. That's what keeps the mechanism free and able to function. Okay, now here's my last page. I'll just put it right on the edge here, trying to keep everything even along the outer edges as well. And now what I want to do is add a little caption of some kind to the opening on each one of these pages, and for that I'm going to use some Just Right stampers. These are actually pre-inked with black acid-free ink, and each one has a little quote on it, so I'm going to take one of these small expressions and just kind of develop a pattern for putting these little captions on each page. And when you use the stamps, you want to make sure that you keep your stamp upright push down, and just bring it straight back up. That way you'll avoid any stray marks. So I'm doing one on the center, one on the left edge, and then one on the right edge, and then starting my pattern over again. Now these stampers are good for 5,000 impressions, so I'm thinking I'll get a lot of use out of them. Then I can just put them back in the box, add the lid, and now what we need to do is add some instructions for how to make all of this interactive piece work, and for that we're going to create a little pull tab. I'll use my little score it board again, and I've got a 2-inch piece here that matches the width of my page, and I'm going to put it on the center. So I have a 1 inch on either side, and then I'll use my tool and gauge, pull back with some firm pressure, and now I have the perfect score line separating this into 2 halves. Now when you make a score line, it's important to understand, and this is the opposite of what a lot of people believe, the raised portion of the score actually goes on the inside of the fold. The papers have been separated and already bent so that when you fold it over, it will be nice and smooth on the outside of the card. Even if you score against the grain, it's going to make a really nice fold. Next, I'll take one of the ink pads, black archival ink, and I'll ink the outer edges just to add that same definition that I had on the other pages, add our continuity, and I'll even ink the fold as well. Okay, the next thing I need to do is add my instructions, and I want to say pull here. But I didn't have a rubber stamp that said pull here, so I can actually make one with one of these Just Right dial-up stampers, and I've dialed it up already to say the word pull. The letters will be backwards, so I started with the P and went on to U, L, L. There's actually 10 bands on here, so 10 letter words in this typewriter font. That's 18 point. All right, so when I ink this letter, I'm going to hold the ink pad with one hand and the stamp with the other, and that way I can see exactly where I'm getting the ink. If you do this the other way, where you just bring the stamp down to the pad, sometimes you can't guarantee where it's going to land. So now I'm going to stamp my instructions on this little piece of paper. So I'm going to line this up right at the top, free edge of the paper, push down, and I'm going to rock just a hair so I get the entire letter perfectly on the page. My suggestion to you would be to actually practice the image first on a piece of copy paper to make sure you've got that technique down before you try to stamp on your final project. Now, while I've been telling you that, I've been dialing up my new word here. So I just love, you can just, any word you want, any name, family name, it'll look like you have your rubber stamp of your name. You can address letters with this. It's just a lot of fun. Now ink this again using the pad to the image, and then do the same thing to get the word here. And now I have my custom instruction stamp. Let's get this attached to our mechanism. To do that, I'll just take some of my strong glue and fold it over this tab that extends beyond the edge of the mechanism here of the pages. Make sure that the pull tab doesn't overlap onto the first page of your waterfall. Okay, next we need to anchor this to our page so that the mechanism will actually work. So I'll get my base page right here. I've inked the edges and anchor strip. Now the strip is what's going to hold this piece down, and we need to glue it in some very special places. The first thing we want to do is layer the anchor strip on top of this bottom fold so that the pages then lay on top of the anchor strip. We need to attach the strip to the bottom page of our waterfall. So I have it lined up. I know that this is the area we're going to glue, so everything's in place. The easiest way now is to